What's up, people? Welcome to my review and analysis of one of the greatest sequels and action films of all time, Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior. Now, I just got this in 4K, and let me tell you, the transfer is outstanding. It's like watching the film for the first time, and I highly recommend, if you're a fan of this film or haven't checked it out and are a fan of Fury Road, that you check out the 4K release, because it looks like it just came out today. Now, I love this film. George Miller takes what he did for the first Mad Max film and multiplies it 100-fold, as if that was even possible. This film has some of the greatest car chases and stunts ever put to film. It's an outstanding film, and this time around, it's not so much of a hero's journey, kind of like it was in the first film. Here it's more like a Western or a samurai film, kind of like a Clint Eastwood, Sergio Leone movie where Mad Max wanders into a situation, gets caught up in the middle of it, and has to choose. He has to make a moral decision. And that's one of the reasons why I think this film resonates with so many, on top of the awesome action sequences. And just like I stated, it's one of the greatest sequels of all time. It's just a million times more ambitious than the first movie, and that's because it had such a significant amount of more money backing it up. The first Mad Max film was a low-budget independent film, probably one of the most successful independent films in the history of cinema. Definitely one of the most successful Australian films. And here now George Miller has money to play with, and he's able to afford things that he probably could only imagine for the first film. So we have epic car chases, epic cars, epic scenes, epic sequences, epic set pieces, epic costumes. I mean, the acting is just outstanding. This time around, Mel Gibson, he kind of talks a lot less than he did in the first film, but like I said, I'm drawing parallels between him and Clint Eastwood in the Fistful of Dollars trilogy, right? Clint Eastwood, he says very little in those films, right? He's just kind of like the observer, the one that wanders into town, the one that gets into the middle of everything, and he has to make a decision to be selfish and be all about himself, or to choose humanity, his humanity, to help others. And we kind of see something similar to this in, let's say, Star Wars, the original Star Wars with Han Solo. He's the space cowboy. Initially, he's all about himself. He only cares about himself. But at the very end, he chooses to do the right thing and come through for his friends. Well, in this film, Mad Max is in a similar scenario. Initially, throughout the film, he's all about himself. He just wants to get his car back. He just wants to get the juice. He just wants to get the gasoline so he could go about wandering the wasteland on his own. He doesn't want to connect with nobody. And he has to make a choice, because that small settlement that are trying to protect all the gasoline that they have, they ask Max for help from Humongous and his gang of insane, I guess you want to say insane, just insane animals, man. These guys are just crazy. And they want Max's help. Max is like, sorry, I did what I had to do. The contract was fulfilled. I just want to get my car, my gas, and get out of here. And initially, that's what he does. But then something happens. He loses his dog. Seeing that dog die and seeing Max lose his V8 Interceptor, it was like, it hurt me to watch that. But Max tries to go out on his own, and he fails. He nearly dies. And then he comes back, and then he chooses his humanity. He chooses to help others. And it's not only that he just chooses to help others, he's willing to sacrifice his life. It's not that he's just going to help them and then be able to walk away from this. What he does, there's like a 99% chance of death, and he somehow miraculously survives, right? And the last 15-20 minutes of this film, it has to be one of the greatest car chases ever put to film. Seriously, if there is a list made by someone, a film critic, and they say this list has the greatest car chases ever put to film, and this movie is not on there, that list is rejected by me immediately. I mean, this film set the standard as far as action films go when it comes to chases. And I think maybe a predecessor to this could have been maybe The French Connection. But we'll get into that one day, another day. So yes, this film is amazing. I love it. There's not much dialogue spoken by Mel Gibson in this film, and that's okay, because he is able to emote with his facial expressions in such a way that he can convey what he's feeling. And an amazing thing is that it hasn't even been that long between the first film and this film. However, he looks like he's aged so much. His face looks war-torn. He has significantly more wrinkles, and it really helps the film. Now, this film takes place after the apocalypse. So the first film is basically about social decay. Society is failing, and you have biker gangs just terrorizing towns, and Mel Gibson is a police officer, and he's trying his best to put an end to it, but then his family, his son or daughter, I forgot which one, but his child gets killed. His wife nearly dies. She practically is dead. She gets put in a coma, and then he decides to get revenge. He decides to break the rules, right? And then he gets his revenge. Well, in this film, the apocalypse has happened. It's nothing but a wasteland. And this film right here sets the standard for what a post-apocalyptic film should look like. In this manner, this film revolutionized the genre, or you can even say it invented the genre. Now, a lot of people think that the first film did so, but like I said, to me, that film is more about social decay. I mean, there's still a little bit of a society left, right? You still have stores, you still have diners, you still have gas stations. Here, it's just nothing. It's just desert, and every man for himself. It's a dog-eat-dog world, or basically dog-eat-dog wasteland, right? And one thing that I love about this movie is that opening introduction with the voiceover that explains what happened, the fall of society, the apocalypse. I love it. It immediately sets the tone, and in a way, this film is a complete reboot. It's kind of like a reboot sequel, because this film is so much more ambitious and has so much more of a budget backing it that it feels like an entirely different universe, right? And George Miller is able to tell such a more epic story in this film than he did in the first one. And because of that, it seems like a lot of stuff happened off screen in this film. Now, what I'm referring to is the fact that we don't actually get to see on film Max experience this apocalypse. And I just want to say right quick that I would love to see a Mad Max film where we get to see Max first-hand account, his first-hand account in experiencing the apocalypse. Maybe get to say one last goodbye to his wife. I think that would be a great movie to be made, and I would love to see that. But yes, in this film, the apocalypse has happened. It's a complete resetting of the series. And from here on out, this series has that trend, or has that tone, where we have this post-apocalyptic setting. It's the same in the third film, Thunderdome, and in the fourth film, Fury Road. And like I said, if you're a fan of Fury Road, you owe it to yourself to check this movie out. Because Fury Road and this film, The Road Warrior, have a lot in common as far as those epic car chases and action, right? The first film, like I said, it's more of a low-budget, independent film. And the third film just tried to be different, right? And we're going to get to that. But yes, I highly recommend this movie. One of the greatest action films of all time. Such a beautiful story. similar to a Western, similar to a samurai film, and I really love to see this character, Max, have that shift in morality, right? He rediscovers his humanity by helping others, right? And by sacrificing or making that gesture to sacrifice his life to help others, he rediscovers his humanity and he survives, right? And it's very interesting because in the third film, I think the third film has the most I guess you want to say, the third film in the series has a version of Max that is the most human, right? He's a lot more friendly than he is in any other film. He has more dialogue than any other version of Max in these films. And I think it's because of what he discovered about himself in this film, right? So again, if you haven't seen this film, check it out. One of the greatest action films of all time, one of the greatest sequels of all time. And if you're going to check it out, check out the 4K release. It looks like it came out today.
And like I said, this opening, this narration, basically setting the groundwork for the Mad Max universe as to what conspired in regards to the fall of society and the apocalypse. I think it's great. I love this narrator's voice. I just love it when he says that juice, the precious juice. Yeah, this was amazing. This was great. And it was a very effective way in kind of rebooting this series, because this sequel was just going to be so much more epic than the first film. So this was a great way to cover how we got here. Since the first film was a low-budget independent film, and now this one is basically a major motion picture blockbuster, this was a great way to convey to the audience what has happened off screen and really set the tone. And like I said, I love this narrator's voice. It was perfect. And yes, the narrator is supposed to be the young boy with the boomerang that we see in the film. So we find that out later at the end. And I thought that was an awesome way to tie everything together. And his narration and the way that this turns out to be the memories and the recollections of that young boy, it's very effective in generating this mystique for the Mad Max character. Another thing that I really liked about this opening sequence, this introduction, is that we get this brief summary of what went down in Mad Max 1, the most important events, which is him losing his child and his wife. So that was a great setup. Everything we need to know, we know within the first couple of minutes of this film. And as soon as the real movie gets started, we hit the ground running. We have epic chase sequences with some beautiful muscle cars. This was a great way to set the tone for the film. This movie has amazing stunts, and it also quickly establishes the precious resource that gasoline is in this film, or in this world, right? And it's always a pleasure to see Mad Max's Interceptor V8. Love seeing that. Such a beautiful car. And yes, right away, as soon as this movie starts, you know you are in for some epic action, some epic car chases, and that this is going to be 10 times, 100 times more epic than the first film. I also love that Max is now paired up with a dog, and it really is an excellent way to subtly illustrate Max's humanity, because even though he's a distant guy, he doesn't really want to get too close to other human beings. He has his dog, who he cares very much about, and it shows that he's there underneath all the gruff and all the grittiness, that there's still somebody there with feelings, right? It's just that he has hardened himself to protect himself. He's already lost the most precious thing in the world to him, which was his family. But now he has this dog, and I think it's a great way to give Max a sense of companionship while at the same time leaving him with that sense of being hardened. Also, the cinematography for this film by Dean Semler is beautiful. I think it's perfect. It's not too over the top. Things look still realistic, photorealistic, but at the same time, it's stylized enough to give it this extra layer of artistry. I really, really like the cinematography in this film, and it's my favorite out of the entire saga. And the acting in this film is just outstanding. And in the particular scene in the opening where Max is being chased down by the humongous right-hand man, who is played by Vernon Wells, that guy, I mean, right away, when you see him pulling out that arrow from his arm, almost like he enjoys the pain, you know you are in for some really sadistic villains, right? Even more so than in the first film. These guys make Toe Cutter and his gang in the first film look like kindergartners. And yes, the acting all across the board. I mean, Mel Gibson is great, as I previously stated, but also Bruce Spence, who plays the gyro captain, and I thought this was a great character. He was a little bit comedic and pathetic, but in an empathetic way. I really liked this character, and seeing this gyrocopter thrown into the mix was exciting, and that's real stunt work and a real gyrocopter that you're seeing. There's no CGI in this film, and this is why I will always say that Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior, is the best one out of the entire series. Like, for some people, it's like a battle between Mad Max 2 and Fury Road, which I thought was outstanding. Love Fury Road. I mean, those two movies, Mad Max 2 and Fury Road, have so much in common, right? They're very similar. They both feel like 2-hour epic chase films in the post-apocalyptic wasteland. But for me, Mad Max 2 will always by default be the better film, simply because no CGI was involved, right? Those are real people flying in the air, real stuntmen, right? Real cars crashing, real explosions. And for me, Mad Max 2 will always have the upper hand, and I love that. Also, getting back to the acting, I particularly really enjoyed the acting from Michael Preston, who was the leader of the settlement that was guarding the oil. I mean, that dude was great. He was great. He did an excellent job. And the feral kid, again, another great performance. I mean, he didn't even utter a single line of dialogue. All he did was grunt, but it was a great performance, and I was empathetic to him. And I just want to say that there's some great shot compositions from George Miller in this film. It almost feels like he's channeling John Ford, who was the master at the Western, right? Of the Western. And those shots where we see Humongous' men basically intimidating the settlement, right? The settlers that are protecting the oil, and those super wide shots where you could see the desert wasteland, and you see all the vehicles circling the settlement who are protecting the oil, and you see all the dust being kicked up. I mean, it's beautiful, right? And I really feel like maybe George Miller was channeling John Ford. He was getting his John Ford on, so to speak, with those shot compositions, those wide shots. And they're really breathtaking, especially in this new 4K transfer. And also coming back to how the villains in this film are just 10 times more brutal than how Toe Cutter and his gang were in the first film. If you remember, in the first film, Toe Cutter and his gang, they raped this couple, right? But they let them live after they're done with them. But in this film, these villains, they rape the woman, kill the woman, and they tried to kill the guy. I mean, actually, he did die. He ended up dying of his wounds later. So I think this clearly illustrates just how more brutal and evil these villains are in this film. And another thing is, we can see a sharp contrast between Max in the first film and this film, how he begins in this current film. Because the Max in the first movie, he wouldn't just stand by and watch this woman get raped, right? Without doing anything. I mean, he was a police officer at the time, and even at the end of the film, he was driven by revenge, and I don't think he would have allowed that to happen. However, in this film, he just watches, right? I'm not saying that he wanted it to happen, but I'm saying that he's more hardened now. He's kind of just like, well, that's the way it is. I'm not going to intervene, right? And then you see his character change in the near the end of this film, right? And that's the arc of Max, as I've stated, right? His growth of a character. Some people say it's the hero's journey, right? But to me, it's just more like a spaghetti western or samurai film, right? He's changed. The hardened cowboy still has morality deep down inside of him that he's been hiding away so that he can survive. But then having that humanity becomes more important than survival. You are even able to identify this contrast between Max in the previous film and this film at the beginning of this film when he brings back the male companion of the woman that was raped and killed back to the settlement. He's not doing it because it's the right thing to do. He's doing it for gasoline. He wants something in return, right? So, and ultimately, because of that attitude, the guy that he brought back dies anyway, and the settlers there are like, well, let's get rid of this guy. He can't be trusted. He's a scumbag, because they could see that when they could sense that attitude or that sentiment that he only cares about himself. And man, I really love this scene where we are introduced to Humongous. Right, there's so much going on in this scene. I mean, we see his entire gang and how brutal and insane they are, how ruthless they are, even to one another. When the feral kid, the young boy, uses his boomerang to chop off the announcer's fingers, and everybody's just laughing, and then the feral kid kills the I guess, I don't know if it's the companion or lover of Humongous's right hand man, and he just gets furious, and then Humongous has to put him to sleep with a chokehold. I mean, this was just a great way to set the tone as far as the villains. I mean, as far as the leader and just the gang as in its entirety. Right? I mean, you just see that these guys are more than a menace. They're a force of nature, and they are not going to leave this settlement alone until they get that gasoline. And this action sequence where Max attempts to bring the 18-wheeler so that the settlers can take their gasoline tanker and get up out of there. This action sequence was another amazing one, right? So you got your introductory action sequence, and then you got this one in the middle of the film, and all these two action sequences are doing is just foreshadowing the epic third act, which is probably one of the greatest action sequences of all time, right? And Max barely achieves this task of bringing this 18-wheeler, but he's able to do it. And upon arriving back, the leader of the settlement wants Max to continue. He wants him to continue helping them. But Max is like, look, the contract's fulfilled. I did my mission. Give me my gas so I could get out of here. And this is where the leader of the settlers puts it in front of Max's face. Like, look, you are no different than Humongous and his gang. You've lost your humanity because you don't care about anybody but yourself. You're like an animal. You're worse than an animal, right? And Max writes this off. He scoffs at the idea. But Mel Gibson, being the great actor that he is, he's able to convey with little dialogue or no dialogue that those words that the leader is saying to him are true, right? You can see it in his eyes, right? And that's why I like Mel Gibson's acting in this film, right? He embodies this heart on the outside, but having humanity on the inside in such an impeccable way, right? So Mel Gibson, or Max rather, takes off, tries to go out on his own, but Humongous and his gang destroy his car, kill his dog, and once again, Max loses everything he loves. Just like in the first film. In the first film, he lost his wife, he lost his kid. In this film, he loses his car and he loses his dog. Right? He loses everything he loves once again, right? As a consequence of trying to go out on his own, on rejecting his humanity, right? Ultimately, he decides not only to take revenge, but to sacrifice his life. The gesture that, there's a 99% chance that he can die, right? And he decides to take it upon himself to lead the mission to help the settlers escape with their gasoline and escape from Humongous. And a great thing about the ending to this film is that Mad Max, he thinks that he is practically just sacrificing himself as he goes head on against Humongous in this epic crash, right? And I don't know if he even has the capability to believe that the gasoline is going to explode or that it's all gone, because he probably thinks that he's going to die when he's going to crash into Humongous. And then he comes to and realizes that the tanker was not even filled with gasoline. It was filled with sand, and that the settlers had the gasoline on buses, and that the whole point was to lure Humongous's men away from the settlers that were escaping with the gasoline. And then here comes the gyrocopter, led by the gyro captain, or flown by the gyro captain rather, to pick up the feral kid who was helping Max out, let Max know what was going on, right? So we have this conclusion where Max rediscovers his humanity. The settlers are able to escape, right? So it's not bittersweet like the ending of Mad Max 1, which is why I think this film is a little bit more well received or enjoyed than the first film, right? And I love this film with all my heart. Just like the first film, as soon as this movie ends, I want to pop it in and watch it again, right? The action sequences alone are worth watching this film. There's nothing like it. And yeah, this film is easily an A+. Like I've said, one of the greatest sequels of all time, one of the greatest action films of all time. Thank you guys for listening to this review and in-depth analysis. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, and share. Take care, and last but not least, one love, people.